Welcome to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. And now your host, Tim Johnson.
With a history that dates back to 1919 and a Louisiana leadership team, Brown & Root Industrial is back as a major player in the petrochemical and refining sectors. Andy Dupuy, President and CEO of Brown & Root Industrial, joins us when we return on this edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Since 1919, we've designed and constructed hundreds of industrial plants, roads, ships, dams, and executed some of the most complex jobs in the world. In fact, our quality and dependability are legendary. Today, the legend continues as Brown & Root delivers engineering, construction, maintenance, and industrial specialty services throughout the U.S. and the world from our headquarters here in Louisiana. We are Brown & Root.
In Baton Rouge, see your good neighbor State Farm agent Brady Flavin for your insurance and financial needs.
For over a quarter century, Kelly's has operated with honesty, integrity, and above all, safety. Kelly's features a fleet of quality equipment operated by dedicated, safety-minded employees skilled in land clearing, above-ground right-of-way maintenance, vegetation control, station yard and manned facility maintenance, above-ground pipeline support, and more. Kelly's Industrial Services, where pipeline right-of-way maintenance gets done right.
Consumers and property owners with construction projects can have a successful result or regretful experiences that could have been avoided. Before any construction project, verify licensure of the contractor and check references. Scammers will claim to be insured or bonded, so always check first. Download our app, LA Contractor, from the Android or Apple Store. Visit our website, lacontractor.org, or contact the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors. We're here to help before things go wrong. Hire a licensed contractor. It's the law.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Very pleased to be joined by my good friend, longtime friend, Andy Dupuy, who is President and CEO of Brown & Root Industrial. Welcome, buddy.
Thanks, buddy. Happy to be here.
Glad you are. One of the things we do on this show every week is we highlight Louisiana's business leaders. Now, you've been a leader in the industrial construction sector for a long time now, even though you're still relatively young. Talk about your background, growing up in Brewley, early jobs that taught you important lessons and helped to set the stage for the success you've realized.
Well, you know, Tim, you said I'm still relatively young. You know, I'm 60 years old, but I still feel young.
Yeah. And you still act like you're young. You're still very active, right?
Yes, I am very active. But, you know, I grew up in Back Brewley, which, but I married a girl from Front Brewley, so I did move up a little bit. But no, just to give you a little background, you know, I was one of 5 kids, the oldest, and when we woke up on Saturday morning, my dad had us teed up for work.
Yeah.
We always had cows.
It wasn't a rest day.
No, it was not. We always had a 14-acre garden. We grew potatoes, tomatoes. For the life of me, I don't know why we had 400 tomato plants. We fed the entire community. But, you know, my dad got us up every Saturday morning. We worked, and that's the work ethic that we picked up. All of us as kids are hard workers.
You know, I heard an interview with you, or maybe read an interview with you that you had done with the Baton Rouge Business Reporting. You talked about one of your early jobs and having a boss come to you early on and say, I don't want to see you sitting down. If you're on my payroll and on my time, unless it's lunch, you better be getting after it. Talk about that first, you know, some of those early jobs that you had.
Now, this is going to sound a little funny, but I was 14 and a half, and I was able to get a Louisiana driver's license, which I'm sure they don't do that anymore,
No,
and they shouldn't, but they did for us.
I think they only did that in Back Brewley.
They probably did. But my dad, being a construction superintendent for a local contractor, he got me a really good job. I'd go down to the local business hall and get a permit to go to work. So I got a job at 14 and a half, and my first job was at NJ Plastics off Scenic Highway in Baton Rouge, and I was a laborer, basically a laborer helper making, you know, a couple dollars an hour. Well, anyway, I got out there, and the first thing the carpenter foreman told me, he said, let me tell you something, son. He says, when you're on my payroll, your butt is not to sit down. The only time you can sit down is that 30-minute lunch break. And he said, you can sit down after the job's over with, but during my job and you're working for me, you're going to be on your feet working.
Well, I've had the pleasure, as you and I talked before we started taping today, to have known you for 20 plus years, 22 years, I think now. And that same work ethic, I think, is what characterizes Andy Dupuy today. And you know, you mentioned your dad a couple of times, Nelson Dupuy. You guys started off with United Crafts. You eventually started a business. You worked closely with your dad, ended up, I think, buying him out of the business as he got ready to retire. But your dad is sort of a legendary figure in the industrial construction market in the greater Baton Rouge area as well. Talk about some of the lessons that he taught you. What have you taken away from your time working with and for your dad?
Well, you know Nelson. Everybody in the industry knows him. He's always been a real hard worker to me, and a smart guy too. I have to tell you, we started the business. We were joint partners in 1978, and of course, when you go into business with your dad and you're 22 years old, I mean, he started the business. Right. I worked, and he started the business, but he had a lot of experience. He was in the Army, and he learned CPM scheduling. So he's one of these kind of guys, when he worked for contractors previously, he was the only guy that really understood CPM scheduling, critical path scheduling. So I remember when I was just a little kid, he worked out at Dow Chemical, and we'd go with him to work because he would go in on the weekends and do scheduling when other contractors really didn't do that sort of thing. And we would play out in the plant. I mean, I remember building a plant at Dow
things have
Chemical,
changed, right?
sliding down the beams, playing on the pumps while the guys were out working. In some cases, and we'd ride up crane balls and things like that.
Things you would never dream of doing today,
you
right?
could, obviously not.
Right.
But you know, my dad, when we started the business back in '78, he was one of those kind of guys that he's the first one there in the morning, the last one to leave. And he's just got a work ethic like no other, and a harder worker than no other. He retired at age 57.
But he never stopped.
He never stopped.
Right?
He never stopped.
Well, you know, what's interesting about that, during my time as the Director of Education for the Associated Builders and Contractors chapter here, he was, you know, heavily involved in the formation of that training center and the buildings. And in fact, one of the buildings there is named after your dad. Right. And we brought him back in at some point to help do some consulting, to take a look at what we were doing, give us his ideas on how we were organizing the training, some scheduling and some things like that. And even after he would retire, his mind was so sharp and he understood things and had insight about things that were really beneficial. Now, we got about 2 minutes left in this segment, so I want to get into this whole idea of you grew United Crafts into a major player in the industrial construction market in the greater Baton Rouge area, working closely with your dad. At some point, he retired, you took over the business, and then Shaw and Jim Bernhard came calling at some point. Let's spend about a minute or so talking about that whole process. How did he originally contact you? What was it like negotiating the sale of your business to the Shaw Group and Jim Bernhard?
Well, you know, it wasn't a lot of negotiating. I'd been knowing Jim for a long time. When he was at Southeast Fabricators, he used to call on me. And he was the neatest, snappiest dresser you ever saw in your life. He would wear these leisure suits, buttoned down with a big tie, and he would always come and try to sell fabrication. He's a very impressive guy. So when he had gone public with his fabrication business, he said, I really want to grow this business, and I have cash to do it. And he said, I'd like to. He said, you're a company that's well respected in town. He said, you guys do a great job with operations. He said, I'd like to add construction to my offering. And he said, would you consider selling the company? Of course, I turned him down. I said, well, we're really not interested in anything like that. So he bugged me for about a year. And then eventually he sat down and he said, come on, we really got to work this thing out. So we sat down and hammered out a deal, and you know, it's been a great thing for both of us ever since.
We're going to come back from the break and we're going to talk specifically about your time at Shaw, the really good run that you had here, then, you know, CB&I coming in and acquiring Shaw, because really a major player in the industrial construction market globally. And this whole idea with United Crafts, as I remember the story being told, is that Jim said, look, I'm fabricating all this pipe. I need a construction company that can go in and really start to hang the pipe, so to speak, so we can be more turnkey. And I want to talk about that as we come back. We're visiting with Andy Dupuy. He's the president and CEO of Brown & Root, and you're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
For more than 25 years, the TJC Group has been helping industry communicate and build relationships with communities, elected officials, and governmental agencies. We are the leading firm in the U.S. for the development, management, and facilitation of industry-based community advisory panels.
Whether you're building a new facility or you manage an existing business, let us put our community and governmental relations experience to work for you.
The TJC Group, facilitating solutions for business and industry.
It might be one of the most efficient, most effective methods of communications we've ever used.
Since 1919, we've designed and constructed hundreds of industrial plants, roads, ships, dams, and executed some of the most complex jobs in the world. In fact, our quality and dependability are legendary. Today, the legend continues as Brown & Root delivers engineering, construction, maintenance, and industrial specialty services throughout the U.S. and the world from our headquarters here in Louisiana. We are Brown & Root.
What if I said that the American dream is alive and well, and that it exists for anyone willing to build it? That the power of a nation does not reside in its monuments, but in the hearts and minds of those who built them, and that the country's greatest heroes also wear hard hats. In today's America, it's not enough to dream about the future. You have to build it. Build your future at byf.org.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Very pleased to have as my guest Andy Dupuy. He's president and CEO of Brown & Root Industrial and been a close personal friend of mine for over 20 years. We're enjoying the conversation. So we talked about United Crafts at the beginning, your company that you eventually sold to the Shaw Group and Jim Bernhard. But so then after the sale, you go in as an executive at Shaw. You are a key player in the construction division of that organization. So let's talk about that transition a little bit. And the first thing I'd ask you is, what was it? How different was it going from a relatively smaller company that you were completely in charge of to working for a much larger firm like Shaw?
Well, that's a great question. It's sort of the reason we sold it. I was 20 years showing up in an office, going and sit down in my little office with the old photo paneling in it. Right. And Jim Bernhard made this offer. He said, son, you will see the world with me, I can promise you. And I said, hell, I'm in for that. I think that'll be a lot of fun. We were doing in the equivalent of about $50 million in revenue when we sold to Jim. And the first year of business, right out of the hatch, we did $160 million in revenue.
So more than three times the size.
More than three times. And he knew it, and he knew that our little company had the capability of that kind of growth without really any addition to overhead. He had the foresight to know what we could accomplish.
Well, what's interesting too is that you and I both had the opportunity. You actually hired me to come from ABC at some point, I guess at the end of 2000, to go to work for you and for the Shaw Group, and we both got to work with our mentor and personal friend Richard Gill, who unfortunately passed away a few years ago. I know you were very close to Richard and also looked at him as a mentor. Talk about that relationship. Some of the things you remember about your time of working with Richard Gill.
Well, Richard came from the big city, Baton Rouge.
Yeah.
He was a U-High guy.
Much bigger than Back Brother.
Oh yeah,
right?
much bigger than, and he apparently went to school with a lot of influential people and had lots of friends. Whereas if you go to Bruley High School and graduate with 32 folks,
yeah,
you know, there aren't a lot of them that are in influential
34
positions.
at Pine
30,
Prairie,
oh,
my
you
man.
lucky dog. Well, anyhow, Richard was connected. So when you had issues or problems or certain things you needed done in the community, he's the kind of guy that you could go see and he could solve problems.
Yeah.
He was really, we all miss Richard.
Well, we
dearly.
all do. A gentle soul, a gentle spirit, never forgot a name or a face, just a great ambassador for the company. Talk about some of the things you're most proud of during your time at Shaw and then CB&I.
Well, you know, taking this small construction company and turning it into one of the largest in the world,
right,
really, was a lot of fun, but it was a lot of work. Obviously,
right,
we worked a lot. But working with Jim Barnhart, I mean, he's a brilliant man. I'd put him against Donald Trump any day in a wrestling match, in a pig rolling contest.
He's as aggressive as Mr. Trump is.
He is. So, you know, he schemed up all the plans and we executed them. That's sort of the way it worked for us. But, you know, I had a great career. We went out and bought Stone & Webster about 2 years
right,
after we
which is another great story, all of it.
Yeah,
it's only, we don't have time to get into it, but maybe someday we will, right?
Then we bought a company called IT, and, you know, I was an executive with those two companies over time. But, you know, what really, I think, turned my career around at Shaw was when Jim got, we were doing some big power plants.
Right.
We did 3 big coal-fired power plants back in 2010, I think it was, when he asked me to go over and help him finish them because some of them were running a little behind schedule, they were running over budget. So I went over, moved to Charlotte for a couple of years, and we put a little team together, finished those jobs on budget and on schedule. So didn't pay a penny of LDs, turned out to be a really big thing. And it allowed us to get in a great position to sell the company to CB&I.
And that's what you did. And then, of course, CB&I comes in, and we're going to talk about the transition from, you know, transitioning out of CB&I and into Brown & Root in just a little while. But sure, one of the things, Andy, that has marked your career in a very positive way is that you have given back to a lot of organizations, heavily involved in organizations like the Associated Builders and Contractors. That's where you and I first met 22 years ago, as you were on the board directing the training center that I had come in to help to operate. You've been very involved with the NCCER, the National Center for Construction Education and Research. You serve on their board of trustees. And you've also served and been a key player on the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors, and maybe even looking to chair that organization going forward. Let's take them one by one in the 2 minutes we have and spend about 15 or 20 seconds on each one of them. What has ABC meant to you and to the industry?
Well, a lot, if you think about it. We were the young guns back then, if you remember, back in the mid-90s when you were running the training center.
Right.
We ran all of our apprentices through training there. It was NCCER training.
Right.
But, you know, in the real early days, NCCER didn't even exist. It was really a vision of ABC, Associated
right,
Builders and Contractors, to form a group
that was really bigger than one association.
Sure it was.
Right? We knew that the challenges of workforce development were going to be bigger than one association.
That's exactly right, and that's what it's become. That's what NCCER actually has become, and a curriculum that they keep up, and all of the skills assessments that they do are sort of an industry standard. So, you know, we wanted it to be an industry standard. We schemed it up 25 years ago, and guess what? Today it is.
Yeah.
I think it's what we wanted it to be.
And it really has grown. It's celebrating its 20th anniversary. 30 seconds before we end this segment. Talk about your work on the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors.
Well, it's volunteer work. I think it's important work, though, because we're here to protect the public. We're also here to, there's 25,000 somewhat, give or take a few, licensed contractors in the state. And it's important that we protect the public against fraudulent contractors or people who are not qualified to do the job. So I see it as important work.
It really is important work. And again, you got to work with another one of your friends, our common friend, Michael McDuff, who's the executive director of the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors, left ABC and went there and has really done a fine job. I think that's critical. If you look at the most successful people in our industry around the greater Baton Rouge area, they all are heavily engaged in giving back, and that's been something that's marked Andy Dupuy's career. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back and talk specifically about Brown & Root.
Great. Thanks.
We're visiting with Andy Dupuy. He's the president and CEO of Brown & Root, and you're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
For more than 20 years, the TJC Group has been helping companies assess their training needs and to develop programs that improve the effectiveness and productivity of their teams.
Training doesn't have to be expensive or complicated. Let us put our experience and expertise to work for you.
The TJC Group, facilitating solutions for business and industry.
It might be one of the most efficient, most effective methods of communications we've ever used.
In Baton Rouge, see your good neighbor State Farm agent Brady Flavin for your insurance and financial needs.
What if I said that whatever good things you build you? And that in this economy, sweat never loses its value? What if I said that there isn't a challenge in the world too great for a craft professional with the right tools? And that the steps that lead from where you are to where you want to be can only be built by you. Build your future at byf.org.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Having a lot of fun with our guest, Andy Dupuy, who is the president and CEO of Brown & Root Industrial. So let's talk about Brown & Root. You know, we say the legend continues, right? We have an ad on the TV show. We talk about it on the radio show. Walk us through the process of you and Jim Bernhard making the decision to team up again and acquire a portion of the industrial services division of KBR. How did those conversations begin? What can you tell us about how exciting that must have been to say you guys are going to put the old band back together?
Well, you know, hearing the name Brown & Root, which is one of the oldest in the industry and probably one of the most respected companies that has ever come across the industrial market.
Dates back to 1919, as we said.
1990, built the first oil rig off of the coast of Morgan City back in the 40s. I mean, and still are actively working in the oil industry today in the production side of the business. But when I heard the name, I got really excited about the idea of bringing this group back. So when we bought the industrial division, which was basically the maintenance and turnaround business and the JOC business, job order contract business of KBR. I thought, man, this could really be a hell of a good opportunity. Of course, Fred McManus and I were sort of partners in getting this thing started, and the fact that Fred could bring some of the old Shaw ideas into the old Brown & Root organization sort of spiffed them up a little bit.
Well, you think about the talent that you guys have assembled there. Yeah. You mentioned Fred McManus, Guy Scheck-Snyder, Mike Furman, Marcus Deal,
Andy Ferris,
Roger Greer, Andy Ferris, Reba Capers, just on and on and on in terms of great talent that you guys have brought into this team. And so that part of it must have been very exciting for you as well.
It is, and it is, and I think we're blessed to have that much talent in one company. Now, and let me tell you, the talent that we got from KBR, the old Brown & Rooters, people think, well, they just took that name Brown & Root and kind of got started. That's not exactly true. The Brown & Root people, the folks that came over, some 5,000 of them that are on all of these various contracts, many of them had long-term Brown & Root histories.
Yeah, guys been there 25, 30 years.
25, 30, 40 years, some of them 15. I mean, I get all sorts of memorabilia sent over to the office. We've got old newspaper clippings, but they all are so excited about getting the name back and getting back in the industry as Brown & Root. It's just crazy.
It's been really good. So let's talk about what Brown & Root Industrial Services looks like today? What are you offering? What are you doing? What have you combined to create the company that you now are CEO of?
Well, you know what we've actually done is taken these maintenance contracts that we picked up from KBR. We've added this. We've taken the turnaround business and we've beefed it up. Put some old Shaw guys in there to kind of get it going. Right. We bought a company called Petron out of Port Allen.
Kenny
a lot
Freeman,
of you guys.
Jim Hall, right?
Exactly. Just a great company with a 45-year history. Blended them together with it. So we've added scaffold paint and insulation to our
to your portfolio,
to the portfolio of stuff that we do. And then I tell you, one of the biggest things that we've done is we bought this engineering group from Wilbros. It's called Wink Engineering, and the Wink Engineering Group's been around for many years. Right. I've got offices around the country in different places, and Andy Ferris is probably as good an engineering lead man as you could find anywhere.
So you've got a full range of services, and so if you think about some of the other Bernhard capital projects that are out there, you've got Epic Piping that's building a fabulous new facility over in Walker, and there's some connection to that group. So you really are, at this point, sort of a turnkey operation. Got about 2.5 minutes left, so I want to jump on some other things. What do you believe at this point, given all that you've acquired and brought in, given what the history and the talent that came with the old Brown & Root organization, what is it that differentiates your organization now in the marketplace?
Well, it's all that diversity that we just talked about. It's offering all of those services. When you go into an industrial facility and you work in those, you've worked in them, you work in them today, and you know that they don't want to go to multiple vendors. The plants don't want to go to multiple vendors to get their work done. They like to go to a one-stop shop, sign up one contract, and have somebody take care of everything that they need done in that plant. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to build an industrial conglomerate that can satisfy the needs of these operating plants with everything that they need.
Really a turnkey opportunity to go in and say, look, we can do the engineering, we can do the fabrication, we can do the construction, we can do the maintenance, we can do some of the specialty craft work with the insulation and scaffolding. Brown & Root Industrial Services is really a turnkey operation. What does it mean for you as a Louisiana native, a Back Bruley native, to have this globally recognized organization now be headquartered in Baton Rouge?
Well, I think it's great for the city of Baton Rouge. I think it's good for the state of Louisiana. You know, we're the headquarters worldwide. We've got some of the best talent here. I'm proud. I mean, I am totally in awe that we could have somebody like Brown & Root in Baton Rouge. You know, I hope other companies think about Baton Rouge as a place to land. If we could just get the traffic right, I think it'd be a great place to be.
Well, we're going to spend some time on this show and have spent a lot of time on this show specifically talking about that traffic. 30 seconds. Yes. What's your message to the Gulf Coast petrochemical and refining industries? What are you telling them about Brown & Root?
We're back.
Back, and the legend continues, right?
And the legend continues. Yes, that's what we're telling them, and we're showing them some real good talent with a lot of history and a lot of background. We've got great systems and processes that are built around servicing the industry, and that's what we're here to do. Safe, capable, productive services, that's what you guys do. Andy Dupuy, my friend, it's been a great pleasure to have you on the show today. Thank you for your sponsorship as well. We're going to stay in touch. We'll have you back on the show sometime soon, maybe even try to get old Fred McManus on at some point. That would be fantastic. We'll see if we can do that. That's a wrap, guys. Thanks for joining us. Join us again next week at this very same time for another edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.